Hello and welcome once again to the Dr. Zeero Free Magic Secrets Show, where we investigate all forms of magic. And today we're going to be talking about Eliphas Levi and his masterwork known as The Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, a new translation by John Michael Greer and Mark Anthony Magick. And what's going on here is a long story. Because you see, this book changed the course of everything in occult matters. Because it came out in like 1854, right? So this book, first, it's the first introduction to the burgeoning public interest in such matters, right? And it's the first introduction of like ceremonial magic to like tons and tons of people. It became quite famous like instantly. And what's interesting about it is it's two books in one. Okay, so first, it's called also called Transcendental Magic under another title, right? So the one I'm going to be reading from is the newest translation, right? Because Waite, if I'm correct, was the guy who did Transcendental Magic, and when you read it, it sounds like the way that like a goth teenager would translate from the French. This one is more to the point. And the importance of the book, this is the first time that the tarot cards are really brought into occult practice. There was someone earlier named, I believe, Atelia, who was like a professional fortune reader and was using the tarot cards and wrote a book about it in the late 1700s, and he was a French guy, right? So it wasn't until this point in 1854. And what Levi did was assign the 22 Hebrew letters to the 22 trumps. And each single chapter in this book is a different tarot trump. And it has to do with like the magical process or the magical occult thinking behind the symbols and everything. And then the second book in this collected volume of two books is like the actual like ceremonial ritual that you would go through for all kinds of things. Now, Dr. Zeero wrote notes on this book, which you will read shortly. So the other thing to know about this book is this is where Baphomet is coming from. Now, the word Baphomet was actually, it was like a, when they wanted to get rid of the Knights Templar back in the day, they accused them of worshiping some sort of object named Baphomet. So for whatever reason, Levi reappropriated it and then made a drawing of it, which became like the classic goat-headed figure on the throne that you may have seen. And of course, this doesn't stand for Satan. What this stands for is he's a sphinx, right? And you'll learn this if you read Levi's other book, the Book of Splendors. He has a whole chapter on it, but about how it's seen as the rear side of God, and that he's like a sphinx, right? And God is what is worshipped when you use this symbol. It isn't an object for worshiping the devil. And it stands for the astral light, which is that's his term for the great magical agent. And when pressed him back into a corner after reading his writings, it really seems to indicate that he's talking about magnetism. Magnetism is the great magical agent, right? So that's all very important. Anyway, also in this book is where originated the first upside-down pentagram, because nobody was ever using this before this point in time. And what it stands for is not, I am my own God, like the left-hand path propaganda of current day. It means that the elements control you. Instead of being, spirit over the elements in a normal pentacle or, pentagram, if you want to call it that. The upside-down pentagram, it just means, you're being controlled by the forces that you can't control, and your head is in the dirt. That's why it's the demonic symbol. It means that madness has beaten reason. So that's where this is coming from. That's another important thing to know. So when Dr. Zeero proliferates his books, he likes to leave notes inside them for the people who will find them one day. And these are I'm just going to read off whatever, Dr. Zeero wrote once upon a time, but notes on this book. Levi was a Catholic priest, and this book explores Kabbalah, the Christian view of Kabbalah. This was Aleister Crowley's favorite book of all time. This book was the first to ever assign the 22 tarot trumps to the 22 Hebrew letters, and therefore the 22 paths on the tree of life. Thus, it is not perfect. Each chapter represents the lesson of a tarot trump and its principle of number magic. Levi's trump order was expanded, corrected, and systematized by the Golden Dawn in the late 1800s. Golden Dawn method has become standard. Find Book T. For whatever reason, Levi did not assign the Fool as 0 and begins the sequence with the first letter Aleph as the Magician card. Here is the chapter order with appropriate trumps. He based this on the Marseille French deck circa 1700s. The Fool is placed as Path 21 for whatever reason. Now, continuing. This is the work of a man highly educated in esoteric secrets who is lost in his own fantasy and must be taken with a grain of salt. You have to separate the nonsense. And when I talk about nonsense, this guy wanted to be a Catholic priest, and many people listening to the show and people involved in magic, we just simply don't think Jesus is real. Levi really, really, really thinks Jesus is real. So, you know, he's constantly talking about Catholic stuff. He's talking about like Catholic esoteric concepts and all this. But the importance of the book is that even though that's going on, he's still talking about ancient magic and mystical Judaism, and he's talking about Hermetic sciences, and he's talking about all kinds of stuff. But he's always bringing up the Jesus, right? So anyway, Levi names the first 10 chapters after the 10 Sephirot. He isn't directly talking about them, though. His 22 chapters are the line paths. The number magic expansion method is still valid, though, both ways. The Sephirot are like fixed power centers. The line paths are intelligences and energies. There are 32 paths on the tree, technically. The Sephirot are 1 through 10. The 22 paths, therefore, begin at number 11 and end at 32. Aleph is 11, Beth is 12, etc. It's one of the most confusing tricks in tarot. So, the Sephirot are like pure energy centers, best understood by intuition. They are emanations, like having 10 chakras instead of 7 in that parlance. This book is intentionally vague. Levi gives all the keys, yet vaguely and poetically explains the bulk of their reason and process. However, he fully explains the ecstatic visions, realizations, and conclusions one arrives at in great detail. So, let me continue onward. See, the trick in reading something from this book is that, like I said, it's filled with Jesus Christ stuff. So I'm choosing something that is kind of doesn't talk about it so much. So in the first book of this, where it's talking about, you know, trying to explain the tarot trumps and all this. So this is like 22. This is chapter 22. It's the final summary, right, of the whole first part of the book. And it stands for the world card, you know. So I'm just going to read this, and I'm going to cut you guys loose for the night. I hope you're enjoying it so far. We're just having fun with this. So anyway, 22, Z, summary and general key to the 4 occult sciences. Signa Thot Pan. Let us now summarize all of science through principles. Analogy is the last word of science and the first word of faith. Harmony is an equilibrium, and equilibrium subsists in the analogy of opposites. Absolute unity is the supreme reason and the last of all things. Yet this reason can neither be one person nor 3 persons. It is one reason, and it is reason par excellence. To create equilibrium, one must separate and unite. Separate at the poles, unite in the center. To reason with faith is to destroy faith. To turn philosophy into mysticism is to attack reason. Reason and faith mutually exclude each other by their nature and are united together through analogy. Analogy is the only possible mediator between the visible and the invisible, between the finite and the infinite. The doctrine is the continually ascending hypothesis of a presumable equation. For the ignorant, it is the hypothesis which is the absolute affirmation, and the absolute affirmation which is the hypothesis. There are in science necessary hypotheses, and he who looks to realize them enlarges the science without restraining faith, because on the other side of faith lies the infinite. We believe what we do not know, but also what reason wishes us to admit, to define the object of faith and delimit it, thus to formulate the unknown. Professions of faith are formulas of the ignorance and aspirations of man. The theorems of science are monuments to his conquests. The man who denies God is just as fanatical as he who defines him with a pretense of infallibility. We ordinarily define God by saying all that he is not. Man creates God through analogy of the lesser with the greater. The result is that the conception of God by man is always that of an infinite man, which makes man a finite God. Man can realize what he believes to the degree that he knows with reason what he is ignorant of. The analogy of opposites is the relation of light to darkness, of the convex to the concave, of the full to the empty. Allegory, mother of all the doctrines, is the substitution of imprints with seals, of shadows with realities. It is the lie of truth and the truth in lies. One does not invent a doctrine, one veils a truth, and a shadow is produced to protect the eyes of the weak. The initiator is not an impostor, he is a reveler, that is to say, or revealer. That is to say, according to the expression of the Latin word revelare, a man who veils again. He is the creator of a new shadow. Analogy is the key to all the secrets of nature and the only raison d'être of all revelations. That is why religions seem to be written in the heavens and in all of nature. It must be so, because the work of God is the book of God, and in what he writes we should see the expression of his thought, and in consequence of his being, since we conceive of him as supreme thought. Dupois and Volney saw only a plagiarism in the splendid analogy, which should have brought them to recognize the Catholicity, that is to say, the universality of the primordial doctrine, the unique, magical, Kabbalistic, and immutable revelation through analogy. Analogy gives the mages all the powers of nature. Analogy is the quintessence of the philosopher's stone. It is the secret of perpetual movement. It is the quadrature of the circle. It is the temple which rests on the two columns, Jachin and Boaz. It is the key to the great arcanum. It is the root of the tree of life. It is the science of good and evil. To find the exact scale of the analogies in those things which are appreciable by the science is to fix the foundations of faith and thus make off with the wand of miracles. There exists a principle and a rigorous formula, which is the great arcanum. The sage does not search it out, for he has already found it, but the vulgar still search for it and never find it. Metallurgical transformation operates both spiritually and materially through the positive key of the analogies. Occult medicine is but the exercise of the will applied to the source of life itself, to that astral light whose existence is a fact and whose movement is confirmed by the calculations, whose ascending and descending scale is the great magical arcanum. The universal arcanum, the final and eternal secret of high initiation, is symbolized in the tarot by a naked young girl who touches the earth with only one foot and holds a magnetized wand in each hand, and seems to be running into a crown held up by an angel, an eagle, a bull, and a lion. This figure is basically analogous to the cherub of Yesiquel, whose drawing we provide as the Indian symbol of Ardhanari, analog of the Adonai of Yehezkiel, who is vulgarly called Ezekiel. The understanding of this drawing is the key to all the occult sciences. Readers of my book should already understand it philosophically if they familiarize themselves a little with the symbolism of the Kabbalah. It now remains for us to realize the second most important operation of the great work. To find the philosopher's stone is something, no doubt, but how do we triturate in order to produce the powder of production? What is the use of the magical wand? What is the true power of the divine names of the Kabbalah? The initiates know, and those who can be initiated will know if, through the multiple and precise clues that we have just given them, they discover the great arcanum. Why do these simple and pure truths always need to be hidden from men? It is because the elect of intelligence are small in number on earth, and in the midst of fools and the wicked are like Daniel in the lion's den. Incidentally, the analogy which the laws of the hierarchy and the absolute science teach us, being omnipotent, must be the exclusive domain of the most deserving. The confusion of the hierarchy is a veritable degeneration of society, because then the blind lead the blind, according to the words of the Master. May initiation be rendered unto the priests and kings, and order will renew itself. Also, in calling upon the most deserving, and by exposing myself to all the dangers and the curses that surround revealers, I believe that I do a great and useful thing. I direct towards social chaos the breath of God that lives within humanity, and I evoke the priests and the kings of the world to come. A thing is, not just because God wishes it, said the angel of the schools, but God wishes it because it is just. It is as if he had said the absolute is reason. Reason is of itself. It is because it is, and not because we suppose it. It is nothing, it is or nothing exists. And how would you have anything exist without reason? Even insanity is not produced without reason. Reason is the necessity, is the law, is the rule of all liberty, and the direction of all initiatives. If God is, it is through reason. The conception of an absolute God outside or independent of reason is the idol of black magic. It is the phantom of the devil. The devil is death which disguises itself with the worn-out vestments of life. It is the specter of Hiranyakashipu enthroned upon the ruins of destroyed civilizations, who hides his horrible nudity with the abandoned rags of the incarnations of Vishnu. Here ends the doctrine of magic, the doctrine of high magic. Yeah. So, that's Eliphas Levi. And you definitely need to check out this book, because if you're into the occult, if you're into magic, this is such a giant, monumental, monster beast of a book that brought it together. And, you know, I'm not going to say he isn't a crank, because there's all kinds of cranky stuff in this that are just absolutely wild. But there's also the key to the mysteries on so many levels. And you will learn so much stuff from this guy. And, you know, some of it, unfortunately, you could say is invented from his fantasy. You know what I mean? So you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But it is quite the vision. So, anyway, that much said, that's it for the Dr. Zeero Free Magic Secret Show. I hope you sat through all that and got something. So, blah, 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 yakety schmackety. You know how this goes. Hit the subscribe button. Post these videos in various groups. That would be swell. Let people know I exist. Have them hit subscribe, etc., etc. And as always, here's one rockin' outro just for you guys. All right, later, kids.
mother. Give all you got, gonna chica.